Hello and welcome to Horrific Tales. In this show we celebrate the creation of independent authors and aspiring writers. Please like and subscribe and share these episodes so we can help our talented friends get as much exposure as possible. We would also appreciate if you could support our artists by following them on their individual platforms and by purchasing their works. Details on how to do this are in the episode description. In this horrific tale, a socially awkward teenager plots revenge after prolonged bullying. Join us now as we present Stalker by Steve Knight. Darkened eyes, as black as the night sky. If you were to look into them, it would be as frightening as something that you would find in a horror movie, like when a demon possesses their victim. The dark figure stood, all dressed in black, looking up at the terraced houses from the row below. He waited patiently for the light to come on in the girl's bedroom. He knew that she would be there very soon. He had followed her home, although she wouldn't guess that anyone had done that. They both had caught the bus. He was just another passenger. She went upstairs on the double-decker, and he had taken a seat on the lower deck, in order that he wouldn't miss her stop. Outside, the dark evening was drawing in. Katie Finn had been out with her friends at the Student Union in Plymouth University, and left at 19:30 hours, because she still had some of her assignment to look at. The dark figure had followed her, caught the same bus. She hadn't realised. He was just another passenger. This was the first time. His back was against the wall of the terraced house directly below Katie Finn's house, his leg bent up and his foot flat on the same wall. The dark figure, unseen, smiling psychotically at the thought of his victim. It was overexciting him, and he could feel his penis becoming erect whilst thinking of her beauty. His eyes suddenly widened as the light went on in the bedroom. He knew the layout of the house. He had lived in one similar up until 3 years previous. The curtains were open, and the light shone out echoing the silhouette of the girl in the net curtain. He smiled. He could see her. She took her top off, removing it arm by arm, and at one point finding a cut on her head which allowed the dark figure to see her bra. He smiled for two reasons. One was the excitement of him being able to be there without her knowing. The other was the excitement of him getting turned on by her. Go on, he muttered to himself, while invisibly enticing her to strip down even more. He wanted more. He wanted the picture of her naked body in his head, for it to stay there. He took his mobile telephone from his jacket pocket and got the camera ready. She didn't disappoint. Not realising that she was being watched, she removed the last of her clothing while showing her toned curves. The shadow zoomed into the window and clicked away with the camera until she turned and moved away out of his line of sight. He stayed in the shadowy darkness in case she returned. She did, but this time he could see she was dressing again in what looked like pyjamas. This didn't stop him. He clicked the camera several times. The light was suddenly turned off and the room went dark. It had started. Katie Finn was being stalked, and at that moment she didn't know. It had been 3 years. 3 long years. But Mark Wilson had found her, Katie Finn. She had destroyed him when he was 15. Back then he was shy, and had never had a girlfriend like other boys of his age. He was wishing for someone. A girl that he would like, and who would like him, and accept him for who he was. Someone that he could treat well, and perhaps fall in love with. Although, many people say that at the age of 15 you do not know what love really is, apart from the love of your parents and family. He knew that it wasn't going to happen. At the age of 15, and 5 feet 6 inches tall, Mark Wilson was extremely overweight at 122 kilograms. Doctors had tried their hardest to get him to lose weight, whilst explaining to his mother that his health could suffer later in life if he continued with his current regular weight gain. But, living in a broken home, where both his loving parents had split up, and his father didn't want to see him, didn't help. Not that he ever made excuses for the way he was. He knew that many kids went through the same situation every day. That was life today. This particular day, Mark was sat alone in the park, 1 block up from his house, between Langsdale Gardens and Keswick Crescent. He was dressed in his usual black jeans, Nike top and black shoes. Having the option that black made him look less overweight, he was always alone, and had begun to appreciate his own company. Because of this he never had many friends, and found it hard to have any. Many of the boys in his year at school played football or rugby, yet Mark found it hard sometimes to even walk. The teachers had given up on him when it came to sport. Wednesday afternoon PT sessions were a thing of the past, and he was made to sit on the sidelines most of the time, or as always, the last to get chosen by his classmates for the team. He remembered the day well. It was a Wednesday just before 1700 hours, and he had finished school and completed all of his homework. Suddenly he was joined on the bench by a beautiful girl, long auburn hair, slim, and someone who obviously spent time using makeup and other beauty products in order to look good. He had seen her around, and never had the courage or the chance to talk to her. Now was his chance, he thought, but he was afraid that he'd be too nervous to blow any chances that he did have. Who knows? She could be the girlfriend that he so positively craved. Katie Finn knew exactly who Mark Wilson was. She had seen him at school, although she was in a different class to him. She took the chance that he had wanted to take, but was too shy to do so. She started the conversation. "Hello," she said whilst turning her head to speak to him. A smile filling her face. "It's Mark, isn't it?" He nodded his head in reply, although with apprehension. Mark watched her take out a cigarette from the pocket of her jeans. The apprehension turned into a quiet "yes" as a reply. "Yeah, I've seen you around. I'm Katie. You've lived here quite a while, haven't you?" she asked as she began to light up her cigarette. The boy nodded once more and then continued. About 4 years now." Conversation was never his strongest point. Nerves had replaced his vocal cords by all means. "It's alright here, I find anyway," she said as she took a puff of the cigarette. Mark looked at her, and actually wondered if she was inhaling or just smoking to look cool to her friends. "So, what do you get up to? I mean, sitting here by yourself isn't cool. Are you waiting for someone?" He shook his head once more. "Nah, I just like to be alone. I'm going home for my dinner in a moment." Conversation was difficult, and he could tell that Katie was finding it just that, difficult. Little did he know that she had an ulterior motive for speaking to him. "Don't you go to the youth club up at the community centre? That's where most of us meet. You should come along. You might make some new friends." Now at this point he panicked a little. Being ridiculed at school because of his size by most of the boys and girls made him just wonder just how he was going to cope at a community centre. A youth club. Mark's nervousness increased, and he just wanted to get back to the safety of his house. Trying not to draw attention to himself, he looked around. No one else was there. He didn't have to worry about his 40-inch waist, or his 48-inch chest, or even his man boobs pressing the top of his hoodie outwards. It was just Katie there, and it was obvious that she didn't care about what he looked like, or so he thought, because she was speaking to him quite normally. "When is it?" "Tomorrow, and every Thursday night. It's on from 7. Sometimes they're at the disco, and other times they have things like pool and table tennis. I mean, they don't sell beer or anything, just canned drinks. But we usually sneak some beer or vodka inside. We all usually meet around the Asda steps about 6:30. Come on, come along." She smiled at him, and for the first time he managed to make eye contact with her and gave an apprehensive smile in her direction. He also knew this was the first time he had managed to speak to anyone in the area, especially a girl of the same age. Plus, it was for longer than 30 seconds. Usually it was a quick nod of his head and a quiet goodbye before escaping quickly and heading back to the safety of his home. But with some fear he hesitated and withdrew his eye contact with the girl, turning his head away and looking over towards the houses on the left. I might come. I'll see how I feel." Mark wondered if he said that just to get rid of her, knowing that he had no intention of going. Or did he? "Well, if you do, I'll make sure that I take care of you." She smiled at him, that friendly type of smile. Was he doing his normal thing of reading someone wrong? To be quite honest, he didn't know. She reached up to his chin and pulled his face toward her, in order so that she could see and look into his eyes once more. She ensured that he saw her do so. "Right, I'd better get back home. Mum will be calling me for dinner in a minute." She stood up and looked down at Mark. "Make sure you come. Socialise." She walked away while stopping to wave to the boy as she turned right and walked up the steps. Mark watched her as she did until she got to the top of the steps and turned left into Keswick Crescent. She went out of sight, so he stood up and headed home, not knowing that once she was out of sight of the park, Katie saw her friend stood outside their front door. Helen, who was the nastiest of the group of 5 with a face that just echoed bitch, looked at Katie. "Well?" she asked. "It's done," Katie answered as the 4 of them giggled. "He'll be there. He thinks I'm interested in him. Fucking fat wanker." The front door banged as he walked into the house. Mark's mother realised that as usual he hadn't been out for long, but this was a step in the right direction for him. For so long his mother had tried to get him out of his bedroom and away from his computer console, where he spent hours playing games. At times he wouldn't even attend the counselling sessions that the GP had suggested, to try and help him get over the fear of who he was and what he looked like to other people, on the inside and on the outside. Deep inside he was the person he was. The only thing that Mark had agreed to do was go to a group where other like-minded people with a similar weight problem would meet and exercise. BPKF, Busy Persons Keep Fit, was run by the NHS at the YMCA in Burrington Way every Tuesday and Friday. He knew that he felt safe there, as well, and managed to speak to most of the attendees, and some of the nurses. They didn't judge him. "Is that you, love?" his mother asked, whilst knowing that it probably couldn't be anyone else. "Yes," was the reply. "Just went for a quick walk around the block." "Everything alright?" she asked, no doubt just in case her son had met with a problem that might set him back, such as the nastiest of the children who lived in the area. He was lucky that he had such a loving mother, although sometimes he wished she had helped him control his weight problem as a parent should do. Mark smiled. He could not get the thought out of his head of meeting Katie, and being invited by her to go out. In a way he saw it as a date. She had asked him, Mark Wilson, and nobody asked Mark Wilson. "I thought I might go to the youth club tomorrow night at the community centre," Mark shouted down to his mother as she started walking up the stairs. He pictured his mother's face in his mind. She must be flabbergasted, he told himself. The youth club, Mark? This would be a step in the right direction, hopefully the first of many. For minutes he could still see her reaction in his head. "That sounds wonderful," she replied, as she came out of the kitchen and looked up the stairs towards him, even though by now she knew he would have disappeared into his room. But he still heard her. "It'll be good for you to get out, and who knows, you may meet some new friends." From behind his bedroom door he nodded back at her, but deep inside he was still worried about leaving the safety of his room. But, for his own sanity, he had to try. The next day Mark made an effort to get out of bed for once. His mum knew that this was also unusual for him, mainly because of the perception of how the other teenagers at the school he went to perceived him. He was a target for bullying and ridicule because of his size, and he would often come home, much to the anger of his mother, in floods of tears and angry. He used to wish that he had the power to hurt someone. It wasn't he hadn't tried, but when it did happen, he changed his mind knowing that he was too timid and usually outnumbered. To try and beat the bullying, his mother had been up to see the school principal that many times without any success. The school failed to have an anti-bullying policy, and the mother and son combination had continued banging heads with both the school principal and the education department at the county council on many an occasion. The principal's view was that neither he or his staff could police the actions of all students 24/7. Mark's mother had therefore threatened to home tutor him several times, much to the dismay of the school. Little did she know at the time it was going to happen sooner than she had thought. Mark had a smile on his face as he grabbed his packed lunch. He wouldn't have school dinners because he felt everyone was looking at him in the canteen and checking out what he had to eat and just how much he was eating. Therefore, he would sit alone in the form room and eat what his mother had prepared for him every day. In the day that was nearly going to kill him, Mark closed the door behind him as he shouted, "Bye, Mum," then he headed towards the school, a little less cautious than he normally would have. It was like the pressure on him had been lifted slightly, and this was the beginning of being accepted. There he was being invited somewhere. It just didn't happen to him. Many times he had heard the others say that they were going out to a club, or getting pissed, or listened to other boys exclaiming that they were playing football or rugby on a Saturday afternoon, and then drinking or going out with teammates. No, it just didn't happen to him until now. Perhaps he would start to think better of himself, and it would help him control his weight, therefore it would stop him comfort eating. Katie Finn and her friends stood just inside the school gates, but out of view. They saw him approaching from a distance. Hey, he's coming." "Better watch out, Katie. He's a big smile on his face." "Perhaps he thinks he's in with a chance tonight," Gail Kester, another of Katie's ridiculing welcoming party, started to laugh as she stared out across the road at Mark. "No," Katie replied, as she simulated urging from her throat at the thought of being sick. "Imagine that fat, sweaty piece of lard on top of you. God, no." Helen shook her head, her face filled with disgust at the thought. "Aw, yuck, no. It makes me sick just thinking about it." The other 5 girls stood around and laughed at their friend's degradation of their target victim. Katie noticed him crossing the road. "Here he comes," she exclaimed as they all tried to hide the ridiculing laughter. "Remember, be nice." Mark came in through the gates, and at first didn't notice the girls, which is something that he'd probably always do, not notice them, because he tried his hardest just to look ahead wherever he went. His mother often commented that he walked around with his eyes closed, and sometimes he would agree with her, telling her that sometimes with your eyes closed the world was a better place. He was surprised as Katie pounced on him as she walked into the school grounds. "Oh, you scared me." "Mark, good to see you," Katie said politely, with a hint of girlish sarcasm in her voice. She knew exactly what she was doing. Ridicule without the appearance. "Have you decided to come to the youth club tonight or not?" she asked him. He looked at her now, feeling unsure about going. Who were these others around her? What were they thinking? This lot are going, Katie exclaimed whilst nodding her head at the 5 girls, who now seemed as though they were surrounding him, and in a way invading his personal and safe space. "This one's Gail." "Hello, Mark," Gail said as she nodded her head towards him. "Hi, I'm Helen," the second girl introduced herself. "And these 3 boring farts are Claire, Emma and Sarah," Katie pointed to each respectively. "Katie says you're coming to the disco tonight," Sarah said, whilst trying her hardest to keep the rhythm of the conversation going. "She did good, and we're always on the lookout for new blood." I don't dance," he said worryingly, whilst hoping that if he did decide to go, that he wouldn't be made to do so. With his size and his 2 left feet, it would just be out of the question. "She tries," Helen said while pointing at Emma. "Well, I'd better get to my first lesson," Mark interrupted, as he felt himself getting nervous. More nervous than he had ever been, knowing that he had never spoken to these girls before, and here they were being nice to him, as though they had been friends at school with him since the day he started. He walked away and they all waved at him. "Don't forget, Mark, 6:30 at the Asda Steps," Katie shouted. He briefly turned to look at her with some trepidation, and then nodded before continuing his journey. The 6 girls all watched him from behind. He'd feel eyes piercing his back, but as soon as he was out of sight they started giggling with a hint of childish evil in their tones. Girly, blonde, non-intellectual. But they were ready for the plan to go ahead. It was late afternoon. Mark had raced home from school, knowing he had to shower to remove any smell of the bodily odour that usually occurred during the day amongst the heat in the school, and his slight inability to walk without sweating. He wiped himself down and then grabbed the can of deodorant. Then he started spraying, whilst trying to hide every possibility of body odour that may occur both before and during the evening ahead. "Oh my God," Mark's mum said as she saw him coming down the stairs. "You smell like a whore's handbag." Humorously, she put her finger on her nose and held her nostrils together. The both of them laughed. "Just how much deodorant have you put on?" He smiled and joined in the joke. "Enough, so I don't smell." "There must be a girl involved then," she said with a smile on her face as she reached over and tidied her boy's hoodie, straightening the hood and brushing down the crinkles. She watched his face go red with embarrassment. "Aha, so that's it," she said as she pinched his left cheek. "What's her name then?" "Mom." Mark waited patiently, checking the clock on the kitchen wall several times every few minutes. He said he'd get up to the meeting point around 18:40 because he didn't want to be first. He didn't want to appear forward and make it look like he was just there for Katie. He would just join the rest of the group who had arrived before him and just try to fit in. That was his plan. Katie had said she would introduce him. He remembered her saying just that. He had already met some of her girly friends at school, and so would have someone else to speak to. Katie and her friends had invited him to the youth club disco. If he didn't like it, then he could always just go home. Just by going in the first place was a step in the right direction. He'd be able to tell his therapist about it. At 18:30, Mark jumped up, walked out to the hallway and grabbed his front door keys from the hook in the wall beside the coat hooks. "Bye, Mum," he shouted as he disappeared out through the door before his mum could even reply. Then he turned left and headed up the steps, rather than attempt the hill. That way, if he got out of breath, as was usually the case, he could stop and recover. He knew that if he went towards the road, then he'd be noticed in the hill, where all the cars were passing, and he would feel as though the people in the cars would be laughing at him. Even though he'd been told by his counsellor that if he couldn't hear what they were saying, then why worry, because they may not be saying anything about him at all. He could see it in his mind now as clear as day. He reached the subway that went under Miller Way. On the other side was the entrance to the local primary school, and the ramp to the bus stop on the left. Mark turned right and headed up towards the Asda superstore, feeling himself becoming more and more nervous whilst telling himself that he still had time to turn back and go home. But he didn't want to let either himself or his mother down, so he took a deep breath and set his sights on achieving a goal for the evening. He was going to meet Katie and some new friends. Minutes later he was stood outside the entrance of the superstore and just stopped, just enough for him not to be able to see the steps and for anyone on the steps to not be able to see him. Suddenly there was a friendly voice from behind him. "Hey, what are you doing here?" Kitty demanded to know. Come and meet the rest of the gang. There'll be quite a few of us. She put her arm around his shoulders. Now he was anxious. At first, he still didn't move, even though Kitty was trying her hardest to edge him forwards towards the meeting point. His feet appeared fixed to the floor. I'm not sure, he mentioned. I've told everyone that you're joining us, Kitty said while looking at him face to face. Don't worry, we won't bite. That was enough for him to lose some of the fear of meeting new people. Kitty was reassuring and supporting him, so he started walking with her and reached the top of the steps. He looked downwards. At the bottom of the steps were a group of people all about his age. Some he recognised from school, and some he didn't. Some, he knew, had already been nasty to him, so he began to worry whether the nastiness would continue. But then he told himself that at this moment in time it was too late, and if it happened, then he'd have to deal with it in the best way that he could. Okay, Mark commented with a deep sigh whilst taking a deep breath, and then started to descend the steps with the girl at his side. He looked down. The group at the bottom all stopped, as they realised that Mark and Kitty were coming down the steps. They all went silent. He began to worry once more. The last flight of steps. Finally he was at the bottom. Kitty had left him. He could see the smile on the group's faces. Kitty was to the right of him, but there were several teenagers in between him and Kitty. She started to laugh. This is Mark, everyone, she announced while looking at him and smiling in a humiliating way. The crowd were all quiet at first, and then also started to smile and laugh in the same way. Mark started to feel uneasy, and he could feel the humiliation, but he wasn't sure if it was actually happening or whether he was imagining it. But suddenly the ridicule started as each and every one in the group started to chant, God, you're ugly! God, you're ugly! Several times. His face dropped, and he looked at them, turning his head, and suddenly realising that he had been set up. He looked at Kitty whilst hoping that she would stop them. But she was also joining in the ridiculing comments and chants. The chants changed as one of the boys started shouting, You fat bastard! You fat bastard! In the same style that you would expect at a Chubby Brown concert. Mark's face filled with a mixture of fear and anger. He just wanted to get away. One last time he looked at Kitty and confirmed that he had been set up for the ridicule by this girl. He turned around and tried to make his way back up the steps, but as he did, he tripped over the step behind him. Swiftly, two of the boys in the group jumped on top of him. Get off me! Get off me! He screamed, although no one seemed to be hearing anything that he said. The two boys were joined by others in the party, and he started to tear at his clothes. Get off me! The boy screamed. Oh my god! One of the boys screamed out with laughter. Look at his tits! He had torn his sweatshirt and t-shirt as he fell backwards onto the steps while trying his hardest to push them all away. There were just too many of them. Gil, he's bigger tits than you, the boy continued. Fuck off, Gil replied jokingly. They all screamed with laughter as one of the boys grabbed his stomach and all the rolls of fat. It hurt. They then continued with the chants. You fat bastard! God, you're ugly! Mark struggled to get to his feet. Suddenly there was a call from the top of the ramp. One of the superstore's customers who was pushing his trolley over down towards his car had overheard the commotion and looked over the wall. Oi! He watched as most of the gang looked up. Fucking leave him alone! The man passed the trolley over to his son and headed back up the ramp to the top of the steps. Then quickly he headed down the steps towards Mark and the attackers. Mark was near motionless on the steps. The bunch of teenagers all dispersed in various directions, some over towards the community centre, whilst others headed around the corner towards the school field. As they looked back they continued their chants. Katie Finn stopped in view of the man and managed one last, God, you're ugly, before running off. The man reached down to the injured boy. You okay? He asked while looking and realising that he had received injuries in his back and head after falling down trying to escape. It's okay, my name's Lloyd. I'm going to call an ambulance. No, Mark pleaded, his face filled with pain as he tried his hardest to stand up. He grabbed the handrail to his left, and Lloyd, realising what he was trying to achieve, put his forearm under the injured boy's right armpit. I'll be okay, I just need to get home, Mark exclaimed as he looked around and tried to get his bearings, whilst looking and feeling slightly confused and overwhelmed about what just happened to him. I really think we should get you checked out, young man. You've banged your head. Look, it's bleeding. Lloyd reached up and placed his hand on Mark's head wound. Word had gotten around, and suddenly someone appeared beside the Good Samaritan carrying a first aid kit. Lloyd noticed the uniform and guessed it was one of the Stalker store's employees. "We need to get you to a hospital, mate," the employee exclaimed. Both Lloyd and Mark looked at him as he reached into the box and pulled out a pad. Lloyd removed his hand away from Mark's head wound, and the employee pressed the pad on the gaping wound and then started to wrap the bandage around his head. "Good idea," Lloyd commented. "It's okay, customer service have already called an ambulance." He looked at Mark. "We need to set you back down." He didn't need to be asked as the victim collapsed. The two men caught him just as time as his world went black. That was Mark's annus horribilis of the year 2019, the year that made him what he is. His mother refused for him to return to school and took up her threat of home tuition with much success. She started with the help of support groups and medical professionals to rebuild his life. He remained a recluse for 3 years, during which he keyed in top grades in his homeschool GCSEs and A-levels. 2022, Mark Wilson was unrecognisable. It took those 3 and a bit years for him to slim down and become the confident motherfucker he now was. People looked at him, and when he told them he used to be 122 kilos, they would reply, "No, there's no way you're 122 kilos. No, there wasn't. If there's one thing that he learned from his ridicule he received at the hands of Katie Finn and her friends, it is that life is all about control. He was told that. No one is in control of your happiness but you, therefore you have the power to change anything about yourself, or your life that you want to change. Now that day, and Mark remembered it well as though it was yesterday. They were in control. Katie and her friends. Fast forward nearly 4 years, and the tides were about to be turned. They didn't know him. He was now 74 kilos, but he knew that they will soon know him, especially Katie Finn. They will fear him, and the control will be his. Well, we hope that you enjoyed our latest horrific tale. If you want to keep up to date with future episodes, then subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow our social media pages. You can also give the channel support by visiting our merchandise store and picking up some of our items. We would also appreciate it if you took a moment to support our contributing artists, who very kindly lend their talents to the show. Check out the links in the description to see how you can do this. Well, that just leaves me to say, until next time my friends, keep it creepy, keep it horrific.